Hello there, and welcome to our latest Lunch and Learn. I'm Brie Castellini, Seed&Spark's Film Community Manager and frequent voice and face of these various Lunch and Learn sessions. If you aren't familiar with Seed&Spark, we are a platform built to connect people through stories that matter, and today is absolutely no exception. We are the #1 crowdfunding platform for creators who tell stories across all different mediums, and we offer distribution methods through our platform as well. So if those are things that you're interested in, get in touch. You can reach us the easiest at faq.seedandspark.com and start a conversation with someone from the team to see how we might be able to help you bring to life a story that matters. But speaking of people who bring to life stories that matter, I'm really excited to get started with turning this time into a writing retreat. So I'd love to be joined by my guests now, by our wonderful Shay behind the scenes. And we'll get started talking about writing and pandemics and all things creativity in these times. Hello, everyone. So if we could just briefly go around to introduce ourselves, if everyone could tell me your name and what you write, that would be a great place to start.
Hi, my name is Brandy Nicole Payne, and I am a writer of narrative works, so short films, some TV pilots, and a couple of screenplays.
I am Van Jensen. I am a writer of comic books and films, formerly of newspapers and magazines. I've written stuff like The Flash, most recently some Superman comics, and then I also have directed some music videos and short films.
I'm Jen West, and from Atlanta, Georgia, and I am a narrative writer-director for film, and also have just recently completed my first novel.
Congratulations. Very cool. So we've got quite the panel here today. So as always, we encourage everyone in the comments to send in questions if they'd like us to talk about them. They can be questions specifically for one of our amazing panelists or questions broadly for everyone about writing and creativity and these crazy, crazy times. So speaking of, how are you guys feeling right now about like your own productivity? Do you feel pressured to be productive? And do you think that pressure, if it's happening at all, is coming internally or from the people out there who are just like waiting for you to drop your Macbeth?
I am so sick of the like, here's the list of everything that Shakespeare wrote under quarantine. Like that's enough of that. But also I have 2 young children. So I'm like, if I compose 1 email every day, I'm feeling pretty solid.
Yeah.
Yes, I have 3 kids, and literally last night, I think I wrote 4 lines, 4 lines of dialogue on a screenplay that I'm writing now, and then fell asleep with my laptop in my lap. And then my husband woke up because he was already asleep, and he was like, "You fell asleep. You are done. Turn the light off." Like, okay. So yeah, I am not feeling the pressure. Whatever I can eke out, I'm thankful for.
Yeah. I have been feeling pressure. I have no children. I am like the prime example of, shouldn't you be doing something right now? And it's been really tough to make space, emotional space, to feel creative, to even block off a certain amount of time. I could talk for days about not writing, you know, having plenty to write about for sure. And there's not a lack of work, and there's not a lack of material. It's just a lack of space in my heart and in my brain.
So yeah, so let's talk about that then, because obviously, you know, it's not just we all have extra time now because all hours are not created equal, and this isn't a vacation, even if you find yourself with, you know, more time without a commute or something like that. So can you guys talk a little bit about your writing process, maybe the before everything version and how it has changed recently?
Sure, I'll go first. So before all of this, I would say I probably wrote 2 times a week. So first of all, I work from home anyway. I work for Seed&Spark. For those who don't know, I'm a crowdfunding specialist here. So I worked remotely anyway. And so that was my daytime. And then of course my duties with my kids. And so I tend to write at night when the kids are in bed, leaving me alone, and I can actually get something done without interruption and kind of get into a groove. And so about twice a week, I would write for about an hour. And sometimes that would go longer, but even if it was just an hour, an hour uninterrupted, I can get some stuff done. That was the before. And so now I am keeping my phone with me at all times so that when something comes to mind, I can sort of jot it down really quickly in my notes app. But actually, like logging in, I tend to write on Writer Duet. I will use Final Draft sometimes as well. But now when I'm logging in into the script, that is like, I can't even give an average of it because it's more like I can't say when the inspiration hits, but when I can actually settle down enough, my mind is not racing. And so that tends to be, again, at night, but like on the weekends after I have like a glass of wine and I've turned on the candles and I've really settled my nerves. And before all of this, I would say there's no time for all of that. You just have to write. But like right now, I kind of have to like get in the mood to do it.
Yeah,
Totally fair. What about you guys?
I've always been a big advocate of like, you know, if you want to write, you just have to write, and you have to, you know, like whatever within your life, you figure out whatever the bits are that you can carve out, and then you just go and like power through stuff, get pages done. And so it always has shifted throughout, you know, like before I had kids, I was that like stay up late and write. I mean, I've also worked full time I haven't for a few years. I've just been writing full time. But before that, I was always working full time and then writing at night. And then, you know, I shifted to a point where I don't know if it's just age catching up with me, but I was like, oh man, like at night I'm garbage. So I was like, I'm gonna have to get up at 5 and write before I go to work. And then, you know, since this has come up, I mean, it's even shifted within the quarantine. Like my wife is an employment attorney. And so because of everything being in flux with furloughs and unfortunately layoffs and everything else, like she's been slammed. And so there was 2 months where I was just full-time dad, wrote nothing whatsoever. Or, you know, like maybe an hour here and there. And then we've gotten some, like we brought some help in. And so I try to keep like go write for 90 minutes, at least twice a day, and just, you know, move the ball forward as much as I can. But then I think we're all dealing with also the fact that, you know, we can't meet people in person. We can't do the things we would normally do in person. So whether it's a creative project or whether it's just work, it's like, okay, when can we all get on Zoom together? And you know, then you like chop up your day with that, and then you chop up like, oh, well, we have to get groceries delivered. So okay, when is the grocery delivery gonna come, and all of that stuff. So it's just yeah, you just have to be like light on your feet, I guess.
Yeah.
What about you?
Yeah, before the pandemic and then everything else, I'm a pretty disciplined writer. I can sit down and usually find the space and time to do what I need to do, and it feels joyful. And you know, sometimes I go through a writer's block, and that'll be a month or two. But I can normally, once I start something, I'm in it and I can do it. And since I don't have children, and I am a freelance artist in general, I did have and do have the luxury of and privilege to block off, you know, certain amounts of time, like 4 or 5 hours I would spend if I was going to write that day. And to be completely honest, once COVID hit, and I don't know, I just had a feeling it was going to be bad, and maybe that's me being a hypochondriac, but I felt it like weeks before. I think it was like a real crisis. And then just kind of steadily my anxiety did this as I saw it actually happening. I'm like, oh. and it's just taken up so much of my brain space. And when I would write before, I would leave my house. Leaving my house was a big part of me writing. And that could be anywhere. It could be at a shared workspace, co-op, or a coffee shop, whatever. I just needed to be by myself, have some headphones on, and not be distracted. And now that I'm at home, I've had to readjust all of that, and quite frankly, haven't really been back in a place to be able to write until fairly recently. And I wouldn't even dare call it anywhere near to what I was doing before. Just yesterday, I sat down and actually felt happy about writing and didn't feel like I was pressuring myself. I personally feel an incredible amount of pressure for myself, not really from anybody else, to be producing and to be taking advantage of this time. And people ask me, like, what have you been working on? Like, you've had all this time freed up. And I find that I ask people the same thing. And I'm like, why am I asking you that question? That's unfair. It's putting you on the spot, as I'm often put on the spot. And you're forced to be like, well, I haven't really done much of anything at all. But that's also okay. I've made peace with that to a pretty big degree, I think.
Yeah.
That actually brings up something interesting. How do you guys talk to other artists right now? Like, obviously the compulsion is like, oh wait, so what are you working on? And then we all kind of remember, oh wow, everyone is working on the same thing, which is just getting through the day. But has that changed your interactions with fellow writers?
It's changed the way I interact with everyone. I mean, my question is like, hey, how are you doing? It's just that, and like, let them take that where it goes. And it's not just COVID too. It's, and this is not my place to speak to. I care very deeply about it, but, so many of us are feeling grief, anxiety, anger. I mean, so many emotions about what's going on with police and with race. And I think, you amplify that by what's going on politically. So yeah, so I just ask people, it's how's it going, and see, hopefully let people feel like they're heard, and then we can, commiserate about, whatever on that litany of things it is that we need to commiserate about.
Yeah, I'm not asking anyone what they're working on. I'm asking what they're watching, because I'm happy to also talk about what I'm watching. And some of what I'm watching is escapism, and some of what I'm watching is not, but it's still, powerful, and it's something that I'm enjoying, and that still does turn on. I will say, for example, I just started watching HBO's I May Destroy You by Michaela Cole, who is freaking brilliant. And in watching that is actually what made me get back into my feature, because I was like, this is so good. This is so good that it inspired me to, I literally that night I wrote two lines, but I was glad for those 2 lines, and those 2 lines made it. And I keep, we keep moving forward little by little. So yeah, I'm not really asking people what they're working on right now. I am reading the work of some of my friends. We are still kind of sharing pages and things like that. But I am just sort of presuming that no one is writing right now unless they're on some kind of deadline, because that is what has helped me during this time, when submitting different, whether it's a fellowship or contest or whatever the case may be. Having a deadline has really been the only other thing that can like get me to push through the noise and the weight of everything that's going on in the world right now.
That's great. Speaking of what's everyone else watching? What's inspiring you these days to get through the time?
Yeah, I just watched I Know This Much Is True. Have y'all seen that on HBO? Y'all?
No, not yet. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And I almost didn't watch it because I knew it was going to be dark. I knew it was going to be heavy. And I watched the pilot. I'm like, oh no. And y'all, it is so good. It is so muddy and disturbing and creepy and endearing. it made me feel like, because I've been like pursuing just super positive material and content. I feel like just light stuff. And I was really scared to take that on because it makes you feel similar to like just a living life right now. That felt very therapeutic, and it felt like I needed it. Anyway, that has stood out. That's something I've seen recently that I would really recommend.
Let's see. We've been watching Magic School Bus, both original and the relaunch. We've been watching some classic Darkwing Duck. Yeah, that's the bulk of it. I don't know. My wife and I, like, we kind of struggle to find shows that we can watch together. And so, like, a lot of times I'll be watching stuff on my own and she'll be watching stuff on her own. But now it's like, I don't know whether we're just, like, I've been reading a lot more. But the only thing, we watch Ballers, which is both, like, I think it's fun and frivolous, but is also pretty problematic in a bunch of different ways. And then What We Do in the Shadows, which is amazing, like the best comedy in a decade, maybe more.
I was also, cool. I haven't seen What We Do in the Shadows. I haven't even heard of that, so I'm going to write that down.
On FX.
On FX. Okay. I've been watching, they just had their season finale, Insecure, and that was absolutely my, like, joy every Sunday night to be, especially because it was, all finished shooting before everything hit. So, there's one episode where they get to go to Mexico, and I'm just like, oh, that's so nice to think about. So now that is over, I've got to find a new comedy. So I have to check that out.
Great. So I want to go back briefly to something that Brandy kind of mentioned, the lighting the candles and everything. Like, do you guys have, or have you developed a new sort of system for putting yourself in a good headspace, especially those of you with kids? Like, what is your process like for just like giving yourself a little space for the 2 sentences or for an hour? Like, what's that process look like? How can we steal it from you so that we can also all be productive and in a good space?
I'm a believer just in getting space between you and kind of life as much as possible. And so whether that's physical space or whether that's like locking you in a room, so like 6 years ago, I guess it was, I built a shed in our backyard. And so I have a writer's shed.
Wow.
That's, it's great. It's like I have an 8x12 room with, it's me, a desk, some bookshelves. And really importantly, and something I always tell people about is, the writer's shed does not have internet. So Wi-Fi does not reach there.
I was going to ask.
And I don't take my phone unless I have to. Sometimes I'll go to, like, be on calls or whatever. But as much as possible, no internet. And then, just really it's like I'll give myself a few minutes to stare out the window and, like, watch the squirrels wrestle with each other or whatever. But, then it's just like, all right, like this is how I make a living. So, it's like I grew up on a farm, so it's the same attitude as, like, when there was a ditch to dig, it's like, well, you stick your shovel in the ground and you go like that. That's it. It's not anything more than that.
I'll say for me, again, besides the candles and this cute little lamp that gives me lighting that I love, one tip that has always worked for me, even before this, is listening to music scores. So right now I'm loving the soundtrack or the score for the show Succession, because because of what I'm writing, it puts me into that headspace of, like, crazy shit is going on, it's heavy, and it's about to be on and popping. So I listen to music that does not have lyrics, because anytime there's lyrics, then I just start singing and then I get off track. But if I can just listen to a score, it can put me in that headspace, and that sort of helps open up whatever synapses in me to be able to start writing.
Yeah, recently, because I was wanting that space to feel like I was leaving the house to go to, we converted one of our extra bedrooms into an actual coffee shop. And it feels so fun. It costs no money. We literally just move furniture around, put that out.
That's amazing.
and it feels like a coffee shop. And it makes me feel so happy to walk in there. I feel like I'm leaving the house and staring into a different space.
I feel like
I want to see that.
Yeah, you need to like have
I know.
Extremely funny.
You got to have a like cardboard cutout that's the barista that you like talk to and have conversations with.
Yeah,
and like a tip jar.
Yeah, we actually had a coffee shop print that said espresso, and it's on the front of the door, and we put some lamps in there. It feels like a little cozy coffee shop. That's been awesome. So we'll see.
Can you please send us pictures after this so that we can share them? Because like I don't have an extra room, unfortunately, but I would love to just pretend like I'll make yours my Zoom background. So like when I'm in meetings, I can have like Jen's home coffee shop around me.
Yes. And actually,
oh man.
Really quick, even our living room, which is what I'm in right now, we put a fort up where there's sheets everywhere, which you can't see because it's on this side of my body. And so where I'm at right now is actually a little cubby hole in the corner of our living room that's blocked off from everything else. So we have all sorts of like little, what do they call it? Like little like working speakeasies, I feel like.
She's being modest, but she also has, I know it's occupied right now, but in her backyard, she has this incredible container and she has a website for it. And I already told her once I feel comfortable traveling again, it's not happening now, but one of these days I am going to go there and rent it out for like a week and just sit in it and write, because it is so, it has a very zen feel. And of course it'll just be me and my kids will not be anywhere near. So I'm looking forward to that day.
How cool would it be just to host a few writers in general for pieces of time, no money, because it's not making any money anyway. Normally it's like a secondary revenue stream for us. And we've learned to adapt without it right now, but that'd be kind of fun for the fall. Let's think about that.
I like that.
I love when things get planned mid-panel.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about physical space, which I really like, and I love the music recommendation. I will say anyone who's writing like horror stuff, the Stranger Things soundtrack is really, really good. There's a lot of options in there depending on what scene you're in. So highly recommend. But let's talk more about like the sort of headspace stuff. So like when you sit down, whether you get physical space or whether you're just in a pillow fort, what does it take to like sit down and put pen to paper? Are you outlining? Brandy, you said you have a notes app. Like how do you actually get things out? How does it come here and go there?
Yeah, I never used to be an outliner, and that is not outlining. It doesn't that's not my natural tendency to do, but I have now have been forced to do as I have to write more, and I'm trying to make this my full-time profession hopefully this year. And so basically the way that I work is I use Google Docs, and so I have all kinds of outlines in Google Docs that someone else reading it would be like, this is a mess, this makes no sense, because then I will take that and then put it into an outline that someone can read if I need someone to read it. But if it's just for me, I'll throw all kind of things in there. That way, if I think of something that's like, I'm not on this scene yet, but I know this line will be great for this scene later, I can stick it in there. And when I get to that part, I'll have it. And then I'll have that open next to my script. And I will copy and paste that scene from the outline into the script. And it's in prose or paragraph form. And then I'll actually start to craft it, as a dialogue. So that is how I work. And so it's, staring at a blank page is always, it's debilitating. So if I can at least have a bunch of crap in an outline to copy it in there, then my mind feels like, okay, I've already kind of got something. I just need to like sculpt it a little bit. And that feels a little bit easier.
The thing that I always tell, especially if I've done a lot of stuff with schools and with the State Department, working with kids both in the U.S. and overseas, and especially in those conversations, something that I always try to talk about is, when you become a writer, you think of like, okay, well, like the skill that I need to master is writing, and really you have to master two skills, one of which is storytelling. and the other of which is writing. Like these are not the same things. You know, you can tell a story without writing. You can write without telling a story, as anyone who's read an email can attest. And so, you know, storytelling really is about structure, and structure is outlining, and all of that works. So yeah, I mean, it depends on the project. I tend to, like, I'm working on my second novel now, and I'm doing a lot more sort of just handwritten notebook work, because I just really have, like, I try to cut as much screen time as possible out of my life. So I finally indulged myself with fancy these German notebooks that are very very ridiculously nice for you know what I'm doing. But yeah, so I just go and I like fill in research, and I'm writing about parapsychology, so it's like fun, you know, lots of fun research and just noting everything out. And then yeah, just starting to ideate and build different things within that space. I draw a lot of sketches and diagrams. I draw like maps of physical space. I draw floor plans. I'll do like sketches of characters, just to, like, none of that ever shows up anywhere, but it helps me to kind of, you know, plan through where everything is, how things work. And, you know, in the thing about doing that kind of work, I think too, is like, you give yourself work to do that is not like actual writing. Like when you have the outline there and then you're going in and you're doing the writing, like that's the most intense, challenging work. And that's where you tend to get, like, you know, if you're going to get stuck, that's what you're going to hit up against, is like not knowing what's next, or just feeling the pressure of turning out something great. But like, I can sit down and like jot notes in a notebook and not care. Right. So like if I'm feeling mentally pressured and or just like dealing with anxiety of life or whatever, or I'm exhausted because my kids aren't sleeping, like I can at least go and, you know, just power through some notes, or I can go and do some research. So that's one of the things I really advocate for, is like give yourself a work process to where, you know, yeah, like this period of time might be a really hard time to polish a script or finish a script. But, you know, if you can take that time and do the research and outline your next script so that it's ready to go, then you still have advanced things for yourself career-wise.
Yeah. Something I'm doing for the next thing that I hopefully want to work on is I'm turning a feature script that I wrote called A Kind of Creature into a novel. And I've already done that once. I turned a pilot into the book that I just completed. And that's actually been a really fun process, because the script acts as a very detailed outline. And you've already obviously put a lot of thought into how the beginning, the middle, and the end work. And it frees up so much more space for what the book can occupy, and those more intimate details. And it's been a really great creative exercise, and I'm excited to do that again. Yeah. So that's what I'm going to do next. But the thing about that's important for me, and is different every time I go to write, though, is what makes me re-enter the story. How do I get re-engaged and re-excited? Because once I'm excited, I'm in it. I mean, then you can't stop me. I'm on a roll. But re-engaging, re-feeling is honestly the biggest challenge. So what I'm doing now is I've printed out a copy of that script on paper. And I'm going to read it like I would read anything else, and just feel it, take random notes as I want to about things I want to elaborate on or take out or explore more. And I really think doing that is going to reignite that flame for that project.
That is a really good point.
Yeah.
I was going to say that's a good point, because like I mentioned earlier, with I May Destroy You, that's exactly what that did. It reignited something where I was like, because it has similar themes to what I'm writing. And I was like, yes, let me get back into this, because it doesn't feel, instead of feeling the pressure and feeling the fear or the block or whatever it may be, it's trying to hold on and capture the wave of like, why am I writing this? What is the reason that I'm writing this? Because when you can think of that, then you can sort of power through, because then it's like, okay, this might be crap. That's okay. Let me just get through this first draft.
Yeah.
That's all I need to do is just get through this first draft so that I can slowly but surely get closer and closer to it being the good thing that it will hopefully be at the end of it.
In writing books,
Totally. So I want to.
Oh, sorry.
No.
I was going to add real quick. And writing books isn't for everyone, but I have to say that extending my vocabulary to that new format has also made me a better screenplay writer. So I think it's a pretty big challenge. It's daunting. It's intimidating. It was for me. Especially I had to make some really like big upfront decisions about like which person to speak in and who is speaking, whose perspective is it. And those things took me a while to decide because it's very different than the point of view of the script or the pilot. So I would challenge people to think about that, because I don't know what's going to happen. None of us do when Hollywood work opens up again and starts moving. Our crew is going to be available for a while. What's other ways or vehicles of how else can we get our stories out to people to read and to connect with? Because making a movie might take a minute, you know?
Yep.
Yeah, Van, I'm curious, in like the graphic novel comic books industry, has there been any change, or because there is no like physical, lots of people in one cramped space production, like, is it business as usual? What's going on there?
Oh, it was huge disruptive change. I mean, from like all aspects of the business, but you know, it is a business, right? We're making books to sell books in physical shops for the most part. So,
That's true.
And comic books, for a variety of reasons that's too long to list and not that interesting. They're not well-run businesses like publishers and shops. It's just this like tiny margin operation. And so when COVID hit, there were all of these comic book shops that, because things are so tight to begin with, they were just like, yeah, we're just out of business forever. Like day one, they're like, I can't handle one day of being closed. So that happened, and then the shops that did stay open are closed for 2 months. Publishers are not shipping. Like DC Comics is the biggest publisher in comics. They just shifted the way that they distribute books, and there had only ever been one distributor for comic books for the past 40 years. So like, that's a titanic thing. So this is all before we even get to the point of like actually creating books. So as that's going on, all the publishers are like, well, we're just going to see if the industry still exists whenever this gets through that. So the stuff that I've done lately is all stuff with DC Comics where it's doing digital comic books. So
I was going to ask.
Yeah, so like I did some Wonder Woman stuff and some Superman stuff and some Flash stuff. And yeah, like that, that kind of continues as it is. But then the rest of it, I'm just at a space where thankfully I was like, I had 2 books come out last year. My next books are like a year and a half away, because I've been working on novels and on TV. So yeah, so I was just like, well, I have these pitches ready to go, but I'm just going to sit tight for a minute and like see if that publisher still exists, and then decide where to go with it. Sorry, I feel like that was a very doom and gloom response.
I mean,
yeah.
I think it's valid to acknowledge there's a lot of things that are going to be changing. The question that keeps getting asked to filmmakers is, so how many podcasts are going to come out soon from all the filmmakers who transition audio dramas, and maybe how many books, I'm wondering how many webcomics are going to pop up again. Maybe there's going to be a resurgence in the webcomic genre. So I want to get to a couple of audience questions. Oh, no.
Oh, I was just going to say there's a huge push to greenlight animated series.
Interesting.
Which is
maybe
it's ultimately foolish, because animation takes so long that by the time those shows are done, like it's gonna be 3 years from now. But regardless, if you want to pitch animation, yeah, like now's the time.
Good to know. Hey, hot tip for everyone out there. So speaking of everyone out there, we've got a question coming through from Monica Lawson, who asks on Facebook, can you recommend a virtual index card app? So Jennifer Dunn has already recommended Trello. Do you guys have any virtual index card app recommendations or outlining apps in general? Because I think there's a couple different versions of outlining programs.
I don't use one personally. I just use my Google Docs. I do index cards sometimes, but when I feel the need to do index cards, I need the actual thing because I need to be able to spread it out and move it around and not have it on a small screen. So for me, that wouldn't work.
I've used Trello. I think Trello, if you're going to collaborate across a distance, it's really effective. A lot of the screenwriting apps have note card capability within them. Those are
Final Draft does now.
Right. So those are all good. I mean, if it's just you, I am a big believer in doing things tangibly. One, to like save yourself the money and the eye strain, and it's like it just becomes more real when something's on a page. And it's easier to move them around and like see everything in front of you. One thing that I did that has really served me well, like you can get a whiteboard, but if like what I did was I got it was like a discarded window, like a big, pane of glass essentially at a secondhand hardware shop, and painted the back of it white. So it cost me like $20, and I hung it on the wall. And so it's a perfect whiteboard that never degrades. So if you're looking for a cool whiteboard, that's my pro tip.
Good tip. I like that. Very fancy. Yeah, I will say I don't use index cards. I use Post-its because I can stick them. So I co-sign the the tangibility. Jen, do you have any like outlining tools or just tips and tricks?
I also prefer the organic route of pen to paper, moving things around in your space as you need to so you see it. I also love Google Docs. I also love Final Draft Notes. I also love Trello. But mostly I do pen to paper and Google Docs, honestly. It doesn't need to be fancy. It just needs to be able to understand it and find it quickly, and that for me those are my go-tos.
That's smart. Yeah, I do think that it's worth taking a step back and reminding ourselves that sometimes, and I am certainly guilty of this, finding the perfect program is just another way to procrastinate. Yeah. Or when you find a seemingly perfect program and then you spend all of this time like setting it up and getting the settings just right, I think that it would be worth it for especially writers who spend so much time in our own heads to reflect on like, what is my goal in finding a new system, a new tool, and if it's to really, I can't work under these circumstances, I need something else, absolutely fair. But I think for me, certainly more than often, it's just, I can't do anything right now. I need to feel like I'm doing something. So let's find a new notes app. So just worth, I'm not saying that to you commenters specifically, but might be worth thinking about. And we have another similar question from Chris M on YouTube. What are the best online resources you guys use or know of? Interpret this however you like.
Wait, what?
Yeah,
best online resources.
I'm gonna say Dropbox.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I know that's incredibly general, but like Dropbox with good file architecture is like your absolute best friend. I mean, you don't have to use Dropbox, but it's an easy way of having all of your files accessible and managed in an actual visual file format that's easy to search, and everything backs up automatically as you're going. But yeah, I don't know. I'm like the least techie person. I just started using the Filmic app to shoot some stuff for fun, and that's pretty cool. And DaVinci is a great free way to edit if you're looking for actually doing some filmmaking yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, this feels like such a broad question because there's so many different online resources that it's sort of like trying to think of what I use specifically for writing. There aren't that many. I will say I do use Pinterest a lot because sometimes seeing visuals that are connected to whatever it is I'm writing about will help to spark something. Of course, it can absolutely be a rabbit hole of procrastination. So you have to be very careful. I'll be on there looking for one thing, and then all of a sudden I'm reading recipes. So you have to be careful on there. But yeah, I don't tend to use a lot of online resources because of the fact that I am like a little rabbit, and it can really eat away at my focus.
Yeah. I'm a purist that way too. I mean, I have nothing special to add. I mean, if I'm categorizing images that I already own or possess or in a collection that are helping me to have a visual reference, then I will use Dropbox or Pinterest. If I'm just dealing with words, I generally just use Google Docs. And it's pretty simple for me to go back and find anything that I've written at any point in time just by using keywords. I rarely go online to, I guess, reference or find resources for writing unless I have a problem. In that case, it's generally just a Google search, and then I pick the best, whatever seems like the most, like whoever knows what they're talking about, then I'll read that about what I'm looking for. But really, it's just about being alone and staying away from those things and getting out and putting it down somehow.
Yeah.
And
the best online resources are offline.
Don't overthink it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough. So speaking of overthinking it, I want to kind of piggyback off a question from Facebook from Nomafanello. I'm so sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, but on Facebook, they ask, what are your techniques to deal with writer's block? And I'm also curious to hear, what are ways that you guys are staying creative that aren't putting words to paper? Because I think that it's a mistake to always boil down writers to, well, have you written anything today? Because so much of what we do is not literally writing. So I'm curious if there's maybe an intersection with dealing with writer's block, not writing, and just also other ways that you're staying creative. We talked about watching movies and TV and stuff like that. But yeah, what's on your plate these days?
I am also a baker, and for me, baking, and of course it doesn't have to be this specific, but for me, the process, because it is so tactile and dealing with dough and moving to think and to marinate on things. And a lot of times when I'm doing that, I will be listening to music, and so sort of unplugging from having to come up with this story, having to move the story forward, to just sort of turn my mind off of the storytelling stuff and just let inspiration sort of take over. That is what helps me out. If you get too wound up, like if you are trying to like put your butt in the seat and force something to come out and it's still not, sometimes you do have to sort of step away and find another way to be creative. So for me, baking is that mode. It's a cliche, but it is so true. You get a lot of great ideas in the shower and you have to write them down like the minute you get out.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am a professional tarot card reader, and I use tarot a lot. And one of the things that tarot uses is narrative storylines. And how are you going to tell the person that you're speaking to, how are you going to translate this and make this apply to their life? And that literally is like telling many stories over and over and over again. And on the witchy note, I've also started like my own like mini apothecary of all these like plants and things that I've found in my neighborhood. So I've been picking flowers and drying them, and I want to do some oils like later in the year just for myself. And that's been really like a relaxing thing, because what I need to do is just get rid of the anxiety. And so anything that relaxes me is good.
Yeah.
So I'll say something about writer's block specifically, that it's always the thing that makes me like the bad guy whenever I say it. never use the term writer's block ever. Like that's solution number one. Like stop using that phrase. And the reason I say that is because writer's block does not exist. It's not a medical condition. It's not, there's nothing wrong with your brain. It's just that you are either, too tired to write, you don't know what to write next, or you would rather do something else. And you have to be really honest with yourself about that. And it took me a long time to get there, but it's like, when I meet young writers and they're talking about having struggles with getting writing done, it's like, all right, sit down for say a day or 2 days with a journal and write down in 10-minute increments what you spend your time doing. Like every little thing that you spend your time doing. And, maybe some of that time is filled up with video games. Maybe it's filled up with watching YouTube videos, like whatever, but figure out what that is. Like maybe it's just staring into the distance. Like maybe you do that and you figure out like, I actually don't have any time to write. And that's fine. And it's also fine if you just decide that like you would rather play video games than write. You don't have to be a writer. It's totally a valid and okay decision. But so that's the thing is like, just decide if you want to be a writer. And if that's where you want to go, that means writing. And to write, you have to honestly evaluate the time that you spend and just be like, okay, like this is what I'm going to sacrifice. Like I have not played video games for 24 years.
Oh my God.
Okay. It's not because I don't like video games. I really like video games a lot. Like I love video games. But when I was in college, I was editor of the college newspaper. I was, a full load of classes. I like to do creative projects on the side. I like to play pickup basketball. And it was like, all right, I can't play video games anymore. Or some of this stuff is gonna really start to struggle. And so that's what I do is I just really honestly evaluate my time. And then there are times when I don't write. And when I don't write, I don't say, I have writer's block. I say, I don't feel up to it right now. Mm-hmm. I don't have it in me, or just like, I need a mental health day. I'm going to step away from it for a bit.
Yeah.
So I think just like kind of incorporating that terminology and that way of looking at your life can be really helpful. I am a really big advocate for just self-care in general. Exercise, like, as much as you can. Like walking is the best place to work through story problems.
Walking is great.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, it's great for you. It is the best, just like, especially if you can walk without your children. I mean, with them, it's okay. You can do it. Like if you can leave them, it is perfect. Yeah. So that, and then also, this is like a very specific tip, but if you have a lot of anxiety, the way that our brains are wired, the only way that you can reset the chemicals of anxiety in your brain, like what's going on when you feel anxiety is like our old ancient brain thinking like a wolf is about to eat me, right? Like that's what anxiety is. Like I got to amp up because like someone's trying to kill me. But now that happens where it's like someone said a mean thing to me online. Now I feel like that. So the only way to reset your brain to stop producing those chemicals and then to replenish is to exercise really, really hard for 30 seconds. Like sprint. Go so fast and so intensely that at the end of it, you can't breathe. And when you're done with that, your brain will be like, okay, we survived. Like we defeated that threat. I'm going to stop making all these chemicals. And if you don't, and if you don't do that, your brain just keeps churning that stuff out, and then it just burns through all of the various chemicals that it can use to keep yourself amped up, and then eventually you're just exhausted. So anyway,
well, I will say, I'll say that on a similar note, like sometimes moving from one area of my home to another, since we're not going to coffee shops right now, can be helpful. But one other thing that you mentioned that does help is journaling. So sometimes when I journal, that has nothing to do with what I'm writing about, but just the act of writing about something, just getting something on the page. I know some people do morning pages. I don't necessarily do morning pages, but some mornings I just feel like, just doing a dump of everything that's on my mind, and just putting something out on paper, getting it out of my head sort of clears the way for me to now be ready to get into this story.
Mm.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah, I think it's just worth reminding everyone that like just getting a new page does not necessarily mean that's the only way to write. There are a lot of ways to write and be creative. And sometimes you do need to take a step back. Sometimes you need to look at your story and say, what's blocking me? Because it's not an immovable thing. If you had a story in your head, you have the capacity to tell it, but maybe where you've gotten yourself in your script isn't right. And you need to go back a couple of pages and say, oh, I see what went wrong. Let's delete all of this and start afresh. And sometimes it's, I need to take a day. I need to do 20 jumping jacks. I need to sprint to the other side of my house because I can't leave because I live in New York. Like whatever it ends up being.
And one other thing, sometimes it's, you may refer to it as a writer's block, but it's really a block in your personal life because there are things that you need to deal with. And if you can afford therapy or can find an affordable therapist or go to church and talk that whoever you go to talk this stuff out, that can be a tremendous help. Keeping all this stuff inside, it weighs on you. It weighs on you. And especially right now, I am especially speaking to the Black creators out there, the Black writers out there. It's a lot of shit going on right now. And if that is weighing on you, it is perfectly valid to be like, I cannot write right now, or at least not until I have someone to talk to about how I'm feeling. It makes a very big difference.
Yeah, a reminder that Maslow's hierarchy of needs just starts with safety. And if you don't feel safe, sometimes you got to give yourself a break, and you just got to focus on that bottom part of the pyramid. So we're wrapping up a little bit, and I wanted to talk about something that is now related to something that Brandy just said. I'm always the most perfect person to segue with. So I'm really curious what your guys' answers are, because you all write in different mediums, you write in different themes and genres. So from each of you in your personal experience, what place would you say storytelling has today in this world, in this revolution? However you want to interpret that, what is the place of story and storytellers right now?
I'll start. Storytelling is incredibly important right now, especially, we have an election coming up, and we're always talking about the media this and the media that, and that is because the media, and we are a part of the media, whether we want to admit it or not. If we are storytellers in one way or another, we are. We're the ones who get to bring things to light. And that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be something powerful or important, although, that is, I tend to write about things that are more in the social justice space. But whatever it is that you are, or whatever story it is that you're telling, people are seeing that, people are viewing that, we are contributing to either helping representation or continuing that status quo in so many different regards. And so we've been given a gift to be able to share our thoughts in a way that can be very palatable, in a way that can give medicine with sugar so that it goes down easier, if that's the way you choose to do it, or to give it to them straight. But the point is, however you take that story, that is what you're able to do. Story shapes the world. It shapes the world. So it's incredibly important to me.
I completely agree. I mean, I think you look at, all of us can think about the sum total of our experience on social media. Like we've all sent messages with facts, just like you see someone that has it wrong, so you're like, all right, I got the facts, check these facts out, and we all know exactly how many hearts we've changed with all of those facts that we've put in front of people, right? None. Which is unfortunate, but it's also reality. It's the way that people work. People work emotionally, and the function of logic and rationalism is unfortunately, it's all about social hierarchy. Like, it's not about discerning rightness. So, when you think about, okay, well, like how are people transformed? Like, how are hearts changed? And it's always stories, like whether it's telling a true story of someone's experience, opening someone's eyes to, being able to feel compassion and empathy through stepping into that life. It could be nonfiction, it could be fiction, whatever that is. And so I think that we as storytellers have immense power, but I'm going to do the Spider-Man thing because I'm the comic book guy. It's great power, great responsibility, right? Like, if we're putting stories into the world and we know that stories change people, well, what kind of stories are we putting out in the world? And we need to put a lot of thought into that. And we need to really, I think, kind of re-own morality and figure out what our iteration of morality is that we're putting out into the world, and what kind of change we seek, and what kind of change we want to affect. Because, bad stories are powerful too.
Yeah, we're marking time right now as artists, and it's going to be hard to even add to what these two just said. They said it so perfectly. When people look back at this time, we will see what happened with the politicians, what happened with a million things. But a part of that big picture is also, what did the artists create, and what were they trying to say? What was their voice? Because their voice is of the people. And we're all in different places. We all have our own points of view, our own experiences. And it's important to share. And also, it's an important time to check your own voice. What are you saying? Is it right? I've had to do that every day. Like, every time I open my mouth, to even want to stand up for something and say something, I'm like, where am I coming from when I'm trying to do this and say this? And we're putting ourselves under a microscope. But by doing that, all of our voices are going to become stronger. And I am very interested to see what comes out of this year from everyone, when we do start seeing new content that's being made, and books and things that are like not reliant on film crews will obviously probably be first. But it's going to be a real pivotal time, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because you will, and adjust as needed, pivot, and don't let fear make you silent.
I love that. Yeah, we had a comment from Gone Hollywood on YouTube, exploring that they think depression and perfectionism and imposter syndrome are things that prohibit them from making progress. And I think that it's worth reminding all of us that it's not about writing down the perfect draft. It's about being better than we were yesterday, making the story better than we were yesterday, learning more than we knew yesterday. Change doesn't happen overnight, but we all have a responsibility in our personal and professional lives and in our place in the world to just be better than yesterday. And sometimes that's all we can ask. Well, we're coming up to the end of our hour. I'm sorry if I didn't get to any questions in the chat, but now that we're wrapping up, where can people find you guys other than the beautiful links in our slider right now? What are things that you want to point people to of your work?
If you go to vimeo.com/Brandy Nicole, you'll be able to see my latest short, which is called Aloha, and it's about a new mom who has an unexpected pregnancy complications, a short film, and I'd love for you guys to check it out.
I've got a book that came out at the end of last year called Two Dead, TWO, that came out from Simon & Schuster, that is illustrated by Nate Powell, who also illustrated the March graphic novels. They're the John Lewis civil rights memoir books. And he is the only cartoonist to ever win the National Book Award. So I'm going to brag on him. He's a big deal. But the book is something that it's based on a true story from when I was a crime reporter in Little Rock, Arkansas. And so it's a story set in the mid 1940s. I've been working on it for 12 years. So it's truly not as if I was on the zeitgeist. But it's about policing and power structures and racial inequality and racial violence. And it's, again, this true story that unfortunately just became more and more relevant. But Nate and I are both very proud of the book and would love to, get more people to check it out.
That's awesome. You can find my past film work on Vimeo /4X, FOURX. And I'm in the process of the queries to the literary agent, so I'm just trying to find that for my book, and hopefully that'll be out in the next few years, depending on how well that goes.
Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. So just some final housekeeping from Seed&Spark. If you are currently watching on Facebook Live, we will be eliminating Facebook Live from our streaming platforms so that we can organize our comment section a little bit easier. So we are going to be exclusively streaming these Lunch and Learns to YouTube as of next week. Speaking of next week, if you are loving the Lunch and Learn programming, we've got more for you. So next week, July 1st at 1 p.m. Pacific time, we will have a series of filmmakers dishing on their online film festival experiences, which is unfortunately still a very, very relevant topic. If you're a filmmaker hoping to be on the festival circuit this year and want to hear from filmmakers who have actually started going the online route, as that's kind of our only option right now, definitely check in on that. And if you're interested in more conversations about writing, we've actually got another great writing workshop coming up soon on July 10th. That's going to be hosted by Emily V. Gordon, and will also be 1 p.m. Pacific time. So definitely check those out. As always, all of our upcoming events can be found at seedandspark.com/events. And we hope to see you soon. So thanks so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you so much to Brandy, Van, and Jen for being incredible and thoughtful and funny. Jen, don't forget to send us pictures of that at-home coffee shop. I am fascinated, and we will see you guys all soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.